Is Hyan coming too?
He is in just a moment.
Fantastic. Okay, awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Victoria. I am a yoga teacher and person that's interested in being compassionate. As part of that, I practice Soto Zen. Soto Zen is a form of Mahayana Buddhism. We'll talk a little bit about that. You don't have to agree with me on being Soto Zen to take this class or read this. This text is pretty universally applicable to anybody who's interested in examining how they think about the world and deciding whether or not some of their previously held notions are things that they should hold on to that tightly. Within the Soto Zen lineage, we have people who take the precepts and they essentially vow to be compassionate people, and we wear these. And this does not mean that I am a teacher or in any way certified to know more than you about these topics. What this means is that I owe you something. This is essentially a sign around my neck saying, I promised that I would be as compassionate to you as I could possibly be. I promised that I would take care of you. I promised that I would think about your needs, promised that I would try to be honest with you and kind to you and fully see you as the human being that you are, full of all the love and light and potential that the world has ever held. And so we wear these so that we can be called out if we don't do that. So this is not a sign of authority. It is a sign of subservience. And I'm here to help you on this journey through the Diamond Sutra. I'm not a teacher in my lineage. I received the precepts last year, and I'm a person who is studying and learning more right there alongside with you. So please don't think that anything I say is the abject, perfect way to be Buddhist, to understand the Diamond Sutra, or to think about compassion. So if y'all don't mind, this is a little bit participatory. We're going to engage in the good old-fashioned Soto Zen tradition of doing names. So we're going to go around the circle, and each person, I would like you, if you're comfortable, to share your name, your pronouns, and anything that you would like us to know about why you were interested in looking into the Diamond Sutra. Will you start us off?
I'm fascinated by this text. Very beautiful, and as you put in the description, foundational. It's like a very key to this text. So I'm just looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary. My pronouns are he, her. I was interested in attending tonight because I love chanting. I saw there's an opportunity to do that in the coming days and weeks. I really don't know anything about the Diamond Sutra, but I'm excited to know what it's about.
Yes. And it's a hard one to chant in English, so we're going to have some fun. There's some hard names.
I've always heard of the Diamond Sutra, and I don't think I've read it, or maybe in passing, but not like this, you know, like in a couple of us. I'm really curious.
Yes.
Very exciting. Very needy. I'm not familiar with the Diamond Sutra, but I'm just interested in hearing more about the various schools of Buddhism. Very exciting.
Sure. So that point, the Diamond Sutra has a lot of vocabulary in it, and even in explaining it, that might be unfamiliar to you. This is an open environment to stop and ask questions about words. I spend a lot of time looking things up. The school in New Jersey, Princeton, runs the Princeton Online Buddhist Dictionary, where they are constantly updating translations of Buddhist words or words that you find repeated in the sutras. So that resource is free to access online. You can ask me to talk about it. I know many people here, Laura and Hyan are two of my teachers, and they know a lot about this as well. You can talk to them about that stuff. There's always an opportunity to learn more about what these things mean.
I'm Chris. I don't know anything at all about Sutra. I'm just interested in any type of growth, positive journey.
What Chris isn't telling you is that she's my neighbor and I made her come. We have one on Zoom. Let me see if we can get. Go. Noah, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Noah. I'm a relative of Chaim, but I was doing some Zen meditation with some people lately over who used to be at Loyola, and they had mentioned the Diamond Sutra, so I was interested in discovering more about it.
That's amazing. Thank you for being here.
No problem.
Yes, so as I told y'all before, my name is Victoria. I'm here on assignment. My teacher, who I received the precepts from, Reverend Zenshin Greg Fain, is going through a health crisis right now. And I asked him, what can I do for you? And he always says this. He's been saying this from our first talk. You can help me by your sincere practice. And this time I was like, no, but I need something specific. I'm at the point in my practice where I'm meditating a lot. I'm going to classes a lot. I'm in this on the daily basis. So it's like, I need an assignment. And he was like, okay, you can have an assignment. You have to chant the Diamond Sutra, and I want you to tell other people about it. So here we are, with a lot of love for my teacher and with a lot of love for all of the teachers in this room and outside of this room to share a little bit of knowledge. We'll now move on to a second great Zen tradition, which I think you'll like. This one is chanting. When we open lectures, we use a specific chant every single time. And it's short and sweet, but it comes from Dogen's lecture on a parable called One Bright Pearl. When we receive these rakusus, we receive a name. It's 4 words, usually when it's translated into English. And the first 2 words of my name are Bright Pearl. So every time we do this chant, I always like secretly think it's about me. It's not, but it makes me happy. So what we'll do, if you're comfortable with it, and if it's part of your practice, we'll bring our hands to Gasho in front of the heart in recognition of all of the teachers, all of the Bodhisattvas, all of the Buddhas that have come before us. And I'll give you a line and you can repeat after me. And unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma. And perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Thank you all. All right. So the Diamond Sutra. Historically, the Diamond Sutra plays a really important role, not just in Buddhism, but in the history of literature, period. The Diamond Cutter Sutra in Sanskrit is called the Vajrakita Dika Prajnaparamita Sutra. I have listened to that 10,000 times and yet to say it the same way twice. It's okay, we're learning. It's pretty short, which you might be surprised by because this is my copy of it. It's 6,000 words long, and it's 32 chapters in the Mahayana Buddhist canon. Are there anything in that sentence that prompted a question from anyone? Because there was for me the first time I heard it. Any questions? Yes, Chaim.
Sure, yeah. So is this Mahayana text after Buddha?
Yes. So this is a text that started orally. The conversations that led to the Diamond Sutra are believed to have been real conversations that took place during Siddhartha's life. So during the Tathagata, the great being, the original Buddha's life, these conversations that were had between him and his followers were things that were memorized by people. This was well before regularly writing things down and printing them was part of the canon. But then when stuff did start getting written down, there was the development of this thing called the Theravada canon, or the Pali canon. The Pali canon represents the kind of original sutras of Buddhism. And it's divided into a million different sections on wisdom and on compassion, and it tells that story. Mahayana Buddhism arises after the Theravada canon takes place. Mahayana is a word that means great vehicle, and it represents this change in the philosophy of Buddhism. When this was originally being practiced during the Buddha's life and shortly afterwards, this was mostly a thing that monks did. These were renunciates, people who left everything behind and went and lived in a monastery and meditated multiple times a day. And were focused on this idea of enlightenment, this idea of personal liberation, which is great. And a lot of people still practice that way today. However, within the monasteries, people started talking about philosophy, and as happens in all religions, people started thinking about the way Buddha talked about attachment and whether or not working towards personal liberation was in and of itself being attached to that idea. And was there anything that was more important? And so these ideas kind of spread out of the monastery, and the Mahayana, the great vehicle, became this change in philosophy from the idea that I'm here in this lifetime to work towards my own liberation from the cycle of samskara, from the cycle of birth and death, to this idea that as a Bodhisattva, as a Buddha to be, I am here not for my liberation, but for everyone's liberation. And there's no liberation, there's no leaving the cycle of samskara without everybody. So that can be translated really simply as, I love you. I love you so much that this sucks. This life is suffering, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to do it again and again and again for as long as it takes until all of you can be liberated. And it doesn't matter if it never happens because you're worth it. The very first of the Bodhisattva vows that one takes when one takes the precepts, after you take the refuges, I take refuge in Buddha, in Dharma, in Sangha, you say, beings are numberless. I vow to save them. And you mean it. So this Mahayana great vehicle is a massive change in the way people thought about not just Buddhism, but about religion. And obviously, something that was so representative of massive change resulted in a huge number of written texts. This was at the time when block printing was starting to become popular, especially in China, and the spread of Buddhism and these long sutras that were difficult to remember, that were originally written in a language that was not Chinese, was a large part of the reason for that spread of the text for that spread of the printing press and of writing and printing technology. The sutra itself explains the concept of emptiness. That's the goal of the sutra. The word emptiness never appears in the Diamond Sutra, but that's what it's all about. It's part of a larger collection of Prajna Paramita sutras on wisdom. Buddhism is in a large part religion of lists. We have, 4 of these, 8 of these, 6 of these. That's how everything is organized. And there are 6 paramitas, 6 perfections that people work towards in order to live a more compassionate life. They are Dana Paramita, which is generosity, Sila Paramita, which is morality or right conduct, Kshanti Paramita, which is forbearance or patience, Virya Paramita, which is diligence or right effort, Jnana Paramita, which is meditation or the ceremony of seated meditation, and Prajna Paramita, perfection of insight or wisdom. So a lot of times you'll hear Buddhists talk about the difference between wisdom teachings and compassion teachings. They're really the same thing. It more depends on who's talking. But what people are trying to get you to see by comparing these two things is that the wisest thing you can do is be compassionate. So the Diamond Cutter Sutra, much like the Heart Sutra, is often associated with the Zen school of Buddhism. Lots of Buddhists read it. It's not exclusively ours or exclusively anyone's, but those two sutras are very, very commonly associated with Zen. Does anyone know how the Zen school of Buddhism got its name? Yeah. So the word Zen comes from the word zazen, or the ceremony of seated meditation. So Zen Buddhists don't sit to meditate, they sit zazen. And every sit is a formal ceremony. And it's such a big part of practicing in the Zen school that we literally named the entire thing after it. We're not the ones who chant the most. We don't have the best artwork. We don't do anything like that, but we do sit the most. So Zazen and Zen really focused on this idea of prajna paramita. And the Wisdom Sutra, the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom, sometimes called the Heart Sutra, and the Diamond Cutter Sutra go hand in hand for this religion. The Diamond Cutter Sutra gets its name from the sutra itself, where one of the disciples of the Buddha asks, what should we call this teaching? And the Buddha says, call it the Diamond Cutter Sutra, because this teaching will cut through delusion like a diamond knife. The Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra, the ultimate teaching on compassion, about how much everyone else matters, just as much as we matter, just as much as every other being matters. It is given to us by Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. She is the one speaking in the sutra. She is the Bodhisattva that represents compassion. She's sometimes shown with 1,000 arms and 1,000 ears and 11 heads, so she can see, hear, and reach out to all of those who are suffering. Her name literally means the one who hears the cries of the world. That's interesting because she's giving us the sutra, the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom, right? The Bodhisattva of compassion tells us how to be wise. So these two sutras, you'll hear them reference each other. They're both short. The Diamond Cutter Sutra is the longer one. So sorry about that, y'all. But they go together for that reason and in that way. If I lost my notes, there we go. All right. I mentioned that the Diamond Cutter Sutra is important historically for the history of literature. A printed copy of the Diamond Cutter Sutra from 868 AD was found in 1900 in China by a monk in this location that's called the Cave of 1,000 Buddhas, because tons and tons and tons of important historical Buddhist texts were found there during the Silk Road. That particular copy of the Diamond Sutra is the world's earliest dated, printed, and complete book. So we found pieces of books that have dates on them that are older. We have found books that might be older if they could be dated, but this is the one that we know is the oldest. It's really known for its beautifully decorated frontispiece. Does anyone know what a frontispiece is? I've been waiting for it since freshman year of college literature to use this word. So, you know, when you open a book and on the right-hand side is the dedication, and there's sometimes a little illustration over here. That illustration is the frontispiece. So this one has a really elaborate depiction of the Buddha sitting on the lotus throne, the throne of wisdom and learning, telling this teaching to the whole world. And it has this really interesting inscription. It was this copy was printed by a monk named Wang Che, and he stated that the copy was reverently made for universal free distribution by Wang Che on behalf of his parents. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, so that is our little short history of the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Does anyone have any questions about historical context so far? You look like you have a question.
No, I just have legs.
Gotcha, mine are falling asleep as well. Let's shift. All right, so the first Chinese translation that we know about of the Diamond Cutter Sutra is actually even earlier than that 868. I keep trying to give it an extra 1,000 years. than that 868 translation. We know that the Diamond Cutter Sutra was first translated into Chinese around the 5th century, and that Tibetan translations and other Central Asian translations probably came about in the same time. But the origin of the Sanskrit was even earlier. We're not really sure. Most scholars think it's in the 2nd or 3rd century, but that is not something, because it was in the oral tradition for so long, that we can accurately date at this point. There are 5 main philosophical points that this teaching is trying to make. The first is emptiness. Everything is empty. Does anyone know anything about the Buddhist concept of emptiness? Would you like to share?
Let's put it in the most succinct way I could, that things don't have a self-existent nature in the way that we perceive them to have. So, the fact that I live around here and I see Soto Study, I see Victoria, it's like, it feels like that's kind of this way, you know? But if that were true, then everyone would just walk in and be like, oh, there's Victoria, even if I never met you, and staring around the studio. So that it's really much more about basically my concept.
Yeah. Yes, great teacher. Thank you. Yes, so this idea that things don't exist independently from each other. Buddhists often talk about Dharma in terms of little d Dharma and big D Dharma. So things that are true and things that are the truth. Does that make any sense? So things that are true are things like, this is a yoga block, this is a cup of tea, this is a backjack, that is Laura Johanna. All of those things are true. Laura and I have separate bodies. I'm sitting on this backjack, she's sitting on that one. Those things are true. But what the Diamond Sutra challenges us to think about is that those things are a mere designation. They're not actually the truth, the big D Dharma. Nothing exists permanently and unchangingly. You can't have anything forever. Everything is constantly in flux. And by learning to think about things as impermanent, as constantly in flux, as being free of some kind of concrete, real existence that never, ever changes, we can love each other better. We can treat each other better. The next 4 philosophical points that come up all start to kind of sound alike at first, but they're different in really, really important ways. The second one is liberation of all beings without attachment to the idea of self and others. This goes back to that thing I was talking to you about before, that when I got this robe and took the precepts, I made a promise acknowledging that beings are numberless. I vow to save them. It's sometimes translated as I vow to save them all. And one would think that that is an absolutely crazy thing to say, right? I did. I listened to people chant that for 6 months before I ever said it myself. And this idea really had to sink in, that you can be committed to the liberation of all beings without getting so wrapped up in the idea that I am the liberator, right? My teacher always says when we chant the vows, less I, more vow. And that's what it's about. I'm not getting attached to the idea that I am this Bodhisattva, this Buddha to be, who's chanting that I am going to save Laura and Hyan and Barry and Noah and Mary and Chris and everyone because I am the great savior. That's not what it's about. It's getting to this idea that I'm not here without you. There's no such thing as the whole universe happening and then just me over here, somehow separate from it, perceiving it all. I'm a part of it, just as much as all of you are a part of it. And if I'm committed to liberation, I can't just be committed to my liberation, because we're in this together. And there's no such thing as your freedom without my freedom, There's no such thing as my freedom without everyone else's freedom. It has to happen together. The second of these four that kind of sound alike, and the third point that the sutra makes, is about giving without attachment to self. Dana paramita, generosity. The sutra uses negatives or negations throughout the text. You'll see that all the time as we're chanting, where the Buddha will say that something is like its opposite. And Dana paramita is often one of the examples of that, right? When we eat meals in the monastery, there's a meal chant that comes before where you recognize the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. I bring this up because I think it's the best way to understand this point. What we are literally saying when we take that food from someone is that I am currently receiving this food. I am the receiver. Thank you very much. I am also acknowledging that there are going to be times in my life where I make food for other people and I will be the giver. And that's also cool. I'm glad that I get that opportunity. But also, there's going to be a time in my life when I am food. And it's okay if it's for a mosquito or it's after my death, whatever it might be. I'm going to be the gift. And that's okay too. There's no difference. We're all just playing different roles at different times of the same thing. No one is ever permanently the one giving the food. No one is ever permanently the one getting the food. And no one is ever permanently the one being digested. So the sutra hits on this point in a million different ways, constantly challenging us to think about, when we give things to other people, do we see ourselves as different from them? If I loan you money, or if I loan you my car, do I see myself as in a different position to you? Have I created some kind of hierarchy that means that I'm the giver and I'm so generous? Am I attached to that? Am I attached to the idea that you see me as a good and generous person? The sutra says that that's not the Bodhisattva path, and that we need to challenge the assumption that just because we're physically giving something, that we are being generous, that we are practicing Dana paramita. The next one of these is called living without attachment. I know we've covered a lot. Are there any questions before we move on to living without attachment? Brilliant thoughts. Okay, living without attachment. Living without attachment is something that's illustrated from the very first chapter of the sutra. The sutra begins with us following the Tathagata, following the Buddha throughout his day. And he goes on his walk and he begs for food and he eats whatever people give him, and then he automatically goes home and sits and begins this Dharma talk with no real pause or attachment or thought. And he's illustrating to us this idea of just doing what you have to do during the day and moving on and letting an experience be done. He gives the Dharma talk, it ends. He moves on and goes back and repeats the cycle of just walk, eat, meditate, do what I have to do, keep going. It's really, really beautiful to see this non-attachment in a really practical way. He is giving this Dharma talk, and at the end he gives it his name, or he gives it the name, and he lets it go. He even referred to his Dharma talks during life as turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, because you're never in the same place. Again, you're coming back to the words in a totally different way every time that you get to interact with them. So the wheel turns, we're not attached, we're moving on. This can sound really nihilistic. And one of the more interesting things about living publicly as a Buddhist is how many people come up to me and say things like, oh, you guys think everything's suffering and everything's empty. You must be so depressed. And being able to explain that living without getting so hung up on that, getting to experience good emotions without being so worried about the next time I'm going to feel good, being able to eat a meal without talking about what I'm going to eat next. You know, we're all, close to New Orleans. Has anyone ever been sitting at a restaurant with a bunch of people who are talking about other restaurants that they've been to? Yeah. we do that in our lives all the time. I work a job where I have to bill a certain number of hours a day. I'm a lawyer. And I always find myself finishing assignments and then going, oh my God, what I'm going to do next. As if I don't have a giant pile of work and a whole group of people who are dedicated to helping me be able to make those hours. I still find myself living in this worry. Practicing non-attachment, being able to live, be in the moment, experience what it is to be human, is this massive lesson that we're trying to get about the perfection of insight, about prajna paramita. The idea is to cut through this delusion that I have things, I own things, I am things, and realize that we're just living in it. We're just all experiencing it together. And that's okay. And I don't have to hold everything so tight to my chest to show that I love it and to show that I care. Any questions on living without attachment? I think that's one of the really hard ones. And then the last one's also interesting. Who here has a job? Does everyone have a job? That's a tough thing to do. This last point is cultivating without attachment. How do I make money or go to school or grow a baby or do all of this stuff without attachment? It seems like I have to be really devoted to my job, right? To advance and make money and pay my bills. It seems like I have to feel attached to keeping my relationships in order to be kind to my husband. It seems like I have to do all of these things. What the Diamond Sutra is showing us, and what the paramitas on a much larger level are showing us, is that sensations are impatient. We don't have to be. So when I feel like I have to throw my whole life into work and be super duper duper focused in order to maintain my job, that feeling isn't me. If I wrote that feeling down in my journal, no one would look at that piece of paper and go, oh, it's Victoria Satanovich. That's just a sensation, a thing that I'm experiencing. And that thing is literally biologically designed to make me feel like it's urgent. It is there to alert me that something might be wrong, to make sure that my family is taken care of, to push me forward. That's its job. But that's not my job, right? And the second I can separate this being my job from that being its job, I can start to look at cultivating without attachment. So once we go through this period of recognition in the sutra, and we see that these great many bodhisattvas who are surrounding the Tathagata for this Dharma talk are still in it. They're still struggling with being attached. They're struggling with being the best student, with being the one that the Buddha likes the most. They're struggling with being the one who understands the most. They're struggling with their attachment to these roles as the smart one or the good student or a follower of the Buddha, even in the first place. And they're trying to cultivate wisdom. They're trying to cultivate prajna paramita. And the Buddha is saying, can't be attached to it. True wisdom is knowing that everything shifts and that sometimes you'll be the smartest person in the room and sometimes you won't even be close to everyone else, and that's okay. But these roles that you fill don't say anything about you. And they don't say anything about anyone else either. You're just here. And so that understanding has to inform the way that you make money, the way that you grow a family, the way that you invest in things and other people. You can't cling to it. You never get to have anything forever. So, does anyone want to talk about their thoughts about that one or about any of the points? We have 5 now.
One general question, you're referring to kind of wheels in that four
Mhm.
settings of motion. Is that meant to imply that we return to a point we've been, or is it more of a as the wheel is moving forward? It's
Yeah.
always in-
So the way that people think about it is kind of both, right? You're coming back to points that are similar to where you've been before, kind of like how similar dates on the calendar sometimes have similar weather over the years, but it's never quite the same. So you're spiraling, you're moving to a different position, but it's really similar to where you were before. Not getting attached to the idea of progress, but also not getting attached to the idea of having to repeat experiences. Things are moving, but we can still learn from the past. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Questions?
Fascinating.
It is fascinating, right? Yeah, it's fascinating. Emptiness is complicated, right? So one of the lessons that constantly comes up is if something's true for all dharmas, all big D dharmas, if something's true for one of them, something's true for all of them, right? And so every dharma arises, persists, and ceases. Everything arises, persists, and ceases. That's kind of the entry point philosophically for understanding emptiness. If we acknowledge that everything has this point when it begins, the earth, Kristen, this copy of the Diamond Sutra, we also acknowledge that there's a time when it's here, when you can see it, touch it, interact with that person, et cetera, and that there'll be a time when you can't do that anymore. The book is lost, the person has moved, et cetera, et cetera. So if that's true for us, and it's true for things that are as large as our earth and our stars, it's got to be true for everything. There's nothing out there that's persisting unchanged forever and ever, even if it persists for a really long time. Even the universe will end. So what does that mean for us? It means that the things that I try to hold on to about myself, being smart, having really kick-ass tattoos, drinking way more coffee than I should, and then having to drink herbal tea at night to calm down, all of those things leave. There'll come a time in my life when my tattoos get blown out and stretched, and when I finally learn to control my caffeine intake. On a much larger level, the fundamental things that I think about myself, having blue eyes and brown hair and a number of freckles, will shift. My personality will shift. My wisdom will grow and shrink, and I'll keep learning. I'll never be the same 2 days in a row. And if that's true for me, it's true for everybody else that I interact with and every other being that I interact with. So how do I love people when I know that they're not going to be the same every single day? By not getting so hung up on why, not getting so hung up on my husband on the day he proposed with, a ton of flowers and a photographer to take a picture. If I only loved him on days when he bought me jewelry, we would have a really problematic marriage. I have to allow him to be this shifting person. And if I'm going to allow it for him, I have to allow it for all other beings if I'm going to understand. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share on what we've gone through? I feel like we've gone through a lot. This is a journey. All right.
There's so much. One thing I just wanted to add to what you were saying in the Diamond Sutra.
Mm-hmm.
So at least back then, for a long time, the reason we use that is because the diamond is the hardest thing. And so if you can cut through diamond, that is harder than anything exists in the earth that's hardest rock. So back then, and that's why a lot of things had diamond.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is absolutely true. Very practical. So you've hit on a kind of interesting historical point in how Buddhism changed. We've talked a little bit about the Mahayana revolution and how people kind of changed the way that they thought about why you're going to sit and meditate or why you're going to try to live a more compassionate life. This also changed for really practical reasons, right? So Buddhism begins in India and spreads throughout Central Asia. And one of the places it spreads is China. And China is really supportive of monks, and India is really supportive, excuse me, I said that incorrectly. India is really supportive of monks. And there's this culture of giving to spiritual people and helping them practice. Buddhism gets to China and they're like, absolutely not, you have to work. You have to work. And so work practice was invented, and work practice became associated with Chinese and Japanese Buddhism in these cultures where there was kind of this ideal of like contributing to the community in some way that was more than just practicing. So there was this idea that monks gave people certain things and they played a specific role in the community, and that there were 3 gifts that monks gave their community. The first was the Dharma, the teaching, sometimes called the 3 jewels, because it was the thing that could not be broken, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the triple faceted jewel, all these diamond metaphors, because it's the hardest thing. It's the thing that doesn't break. So monks gave the Dharma. Monks gave acts of service, think marriages, funerals, etc. And monks gave the gift of no fear, or not fearing. That one's a harder one, right? How does monks being in your community and working in your community give the gift of no fear? It goes back to the Diamond Sutra. If I'm not that attached to you being any specific person, you don't have to be afraid to come talk to me when something goes wrong. If I'm not going to judge you for changing or making mistakes or growing because I don't see you as a permanent thing that I have some kind of ideal of, then I'm an easier person to talk to when you need counsel, when you need help. And so work practice became very associated with this idea of being there, being compassion, seeing emptiness and recognizing that it's the biggest gift you could ever have. Because now I don't have to be so upset when things change. I get to just love and experience it all. It's unbelievable. My face is too far away according to my iPad. Come on. There we go. So where do we begin? What happens? On a very practical level, we begin with the book. This particular translation of the Diamond Sutra, which is what we're going to be chanting, is available as a PDF online. This is the Diamond Sutra, text and commentaries translated from the Sanskrit and Chinese by Red Pine. Red Pine is a Buddhist monk in the Zen tradition whose real name I cannot remember right now. Red Pine is an alias that he uses for his translations. Do you happen to know? His first name is Ben. I can't remember his last name. Anyways, he's awesome. And he does a really good job of breaking this down into understandable text by providing historical context. So the first like 20 pages of this translation, where does it go to? It goes to right here, are the actual sutra. Yes.
Oh, I was going to ask you, tell us about the sutra online.
Yes, so it's 32 chapters. And the chapters are short, 6,000 words. So think
How long does it take
to chant it, usually an hour. Like if you were going to chant the whole thing from start to finish, an hour to 2 hours, depending on how slow you were going. We're going to chant 2 chapters at a time so that we have a little bit of time to deal with pronunciation. Chanting this one in English is hard. There's city names, there's people names. It's kind of a tough one. This translation is available as a PDF online. You do not have to buy it. If you do buy it though, Red Pine is amazing. There is still thousands and thousands of sutras that have never been translated into English. And his work is a large part of, what's the word for it? Large part of remedying that. So you can get it online or you can buy it. The chapters are very short. They're all about 2 paragraphs long. When we chant, in my tradition, we chant to a beat. That's about that quick. And it's a breathing exercise. It's not about getting all of the words right. It's not about even really understanding what it is that you're chanting the first time. The whole point of chanting this stuff in the first place was so that you would start to learn it. And then once you've started to learn it to a rhythm, you can then decide what it is that you want to dive in on and learn a little more about. A class on the Diamond Sutra could be 10 years long. It's one of those things that we could keep diving into over and over and over again. Or we could do as the monks have taught us and just get through it and give it a try and see what we got from it the first time. And then maybe when we realize we can get through it that quickly, we'll be interested in doing it again and getting a little deeper and getting a little deeper so that the teaching really has time to be analyzed and take hold. One thing that you're going to hear as we go through this is that everything has to be subject to scrutiny. Everything has to be held under the light of reason. What chanting allows us to do is to separate getting through it from that light of reason. I'm going to chant, I'm going to start to remember things because I'm going to hear them to a beat. And then when I'm thinking about it later on, when it inevitably some part or some phrase or some word gets stuck in my head, I can then decide how I want to shine my light of reason on it. Am I going to read some commentary? Am I going to look things up? Am I going to talk to a friend? We're just separating the idea that you have to understand everything from the ability to read something and at least get it in your brain and give it a try. There are a couple of little rules for chanting. These are things that are not mandatory. They're not required, but I invite you to think about them. In Zen, we call the ways in which we do things the forms. Zen is body practice as much as it is mind practice. We sit in a certain way, we hold our hands a certain way, we wear a certain color when we go into the temple, all because we're trying to think about every little action that we're taking. We fundamentally believe our actions are important. That's what karma is about. The recognition that you can make change in this world and that the things that you do are important and that they matter. So if I'm going to practice thinking about the things that I do and taking mindful action, one easy way to do that is by having a list of things to do. So we practice with these really simple things, like you step into a room with the foot that's closest to the hinge of the door. You put your hands in gasho and bow when you're bowing towards the altar. You put your hands in shashu and bow when you're bowing to each other, unless it is a monk that you meet on the path. We repeat the same chants. We sit in the same way. We sit facing a wall. We bow to our seat and we bow to each other when we stand up after we sit, over and over and over again. Because I have a list of things to do. I have to think about the actions that I'm taking. And hopefully, when I leave that temple, I'm going to think more about the actions that I'm taking because I've gotten 2 hours of practice in of having to think about every single little thing. This is relevant to you in a way, if you want it to be, during your practice of chanting the sutras. We're going to be chanting the sutra together over Zoom. And there are a couple of little things you can do to start to get into that body practice. The first is, if you buy a paper copy of the sutra, or if you print a paper copy of the sutra, it doesn't touch the floor. This is the Dharma. This is the second of the 3 jewels. We do not disparage the 3 jewels. We're very lucky to be in a place, to be human in the first place, to be able to understand the language that I'm speaking right now, to have access to the ability to buy a book, to have the ability to read this either online or in person, to have eyes that work, to have all of these causes and conditions that it takes just to be able to hear the Dharma. So we don't disrespect it. We are incredibly lucky. Think about how statistically likely it is that you're a blade of grass instead of a person. There are so many millions more ants, blades of grass, molecules of air that you could be, but you're here in this form, and that's awesome. This is an auspicious birth. It's a huge gift to get to be here. So we take advantage of the fact that we get to read by keeping our text from touching the floor. The next thing that you can do, if you're getting into this mindset of being mindful, is when you pick up the text, you just raise it up. This is not a bowing to the text kind of thing. It's an acknowledgement that this is important and that I'm lucky to get to read it and to analyze it. It's not saying, I believe everything in here unquestioningly, and this is, the one unchanging thing that matters. No, this is important and I'm lucky to be here. So thank you, universe, and all of the people, all of the ancestors, my parents, everyone who got me to the point where I could own a book and open it up and chant the sutra. The last thing I'll encourage you to do, if you're comfortable with it, is that after we chant the sutra, we bring our hands to gasho and we bow. Not to the Buddha, not to me, not to ourselves, but to the wonderful magistry of creation that we get to be a part of, to the whole universe of sentient beings, to all of the teachers of the Dharma, all of the Buddhas and ancestors before us, and the Buddhas and ancestors that we will become. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, to hear this Dharma that I might not have heard in 1,000 million kalpas, 1,000 million lifetimes, 1,000 million circles around the wheel of the Dharma. I get to be here, and I'm going to be excited about it, and I'm going to treat it like it's special. These things are not mandatory. You didn't sign a contract to do that if you're going to chant. They're an opportunity to practice. And if it's something that resonates with you, I hope that you'll start to feel it in your body and go through that. Does anyone have any other questions about the practicalities of chanting?
Can you just talk a little bit more about like when the morning chant will happen? And,
It's an evening chant. That's what's on the schedule, right?
I'll double check.
Yes. So, because I thought it was a morning chant, and then I saw it was in the evenings, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
It's on the morning right now.
Oh, it's on for mornings right now? Fantastic. That's what I was hoping it would be. Okay. So I'll switch it on my phone. So it's gonna be 7:30 to 8:05 in the mornings. 7:45 to 8:05. I'm gonna learn how to read a clock, I promise. It's gonna be 7:45 to 8:05 in the mornings, really short. I'll give just a couple of words about what that particular chapter of the sutra is about that day. And then we're just gonna stumble through it. We're not gonna stop once we start. So if you open up the very beginning of the sutra, thus I have heard once the Bhagavagan was dwelling near Sharvasti at Anapanita Garden in Jeta Forest. Like, the words are hard from sentence number 1. Does not matter. What we're trying to do is get through it. And hopefully afterwards, you'll be curious and you'll look up those place names and you'll look through those pronunciations and you'll learn something. And whether it's you learn where that particular garden is in India, or whether you learn something about emptiness, does not really matter. We're starting from somewhere, and we move, we keep going, and you breathe when you have to, and then you keep going, and you just keep picking it back up over and over and over again. We're going to go faster than is comfortable, and that's on purpose. If you ever go into a Zen temple, that is something that is personally done, where you're moving on at like 120 beats per minute, and it feels like it's way too fast. And it's to get you in that body practice, timing your breath, breathing when you have to, moving, 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 moving. Seeing what you're doing with your body as a way of practicing getting through the Dharma and highlighting what it is that you might want to learn something about. All right.
Will you be like sharing or screen the words on it, or do you, like, does everyone need to pull up an online?
So I'll be sharing a screen with the words on it. Thank you for that question. I'll be sharing a screen with the words on it. That's easy. However, if you're going to want the commentaries, you're going to need to pull up either the PDF or by the ebook. The commentaries here are divided by chapter. So it's a good thing to kind of have, even if you plan on buying the paperback book, to pull up the PDF, so that after you read these 2 or 3 paragraphs that we're going to go through each day, if you have a question, you kind of immediately have someone's opinion on what the answer is. Red Pine is one of the foremost translators who's working on this work. And so a lot of his commentaries aren't telling you what to think about the philosophy so much as they're giving you the historical and linguistic context for what it is that you just read, so that you can decide what you think about the philosophy. There's also a really wonderful article on the historical side of the Dharma of the Diamond Sutra on the British Museum's website. So you can look there and they have pictures of the one that was found in the 1900s in the Cave of 1,000 Buddhas. And you can see the picture, you can see what it looks like, and you can see their very high level definitions of what some of these words mean. They also share some quotes that are particularly meaningful from the Diamond Sutra. Some part of it is going to stand out to you. The part of it that always stands out to me is it's merely a designation. I think about that all the time. There's this road into the Zen Mountain Monastery at Tassajara, and they always say that the word road is merely a designation. It's literally like a path down the side of a mountain that like you will fall down if you don't know where to hold on to the ropes. So it's merely a designation. But yeah, it can give you some resources into parts of it that are popular points of contemplation for others. We've got just a couple more minutes. Is there anything anyone else wants to ask or say?
So the morning again, and when is it starting tomorrow?
Yep, 7:45.
And it's chanting and then some commentary?
So I'm going to just give a couple of words of introduction. For example, tomorrow's begins with, this is where we watch the Buddha go through a day and then sit down and start to give a Dharma talk. He's asked by one of his monks how it is that people can walk the Bodhisattva path. And he starts to give an answer. That's all. Really short, really quick. And then we chant. I'm available for questions, by the way, this whole time. My email address is victoria.satanovich@gmail.com. I can also post that in the chat of the Zooms every day so that you can have access to it without trying to spell Satanovich.
Also, so are we, if we're participating, we should download the book and chant with you?
Yes, absolutely chant with me. Like I said, I'll have the words on the screen. You're welcome to use the screen, but you're going to want the commentaries. If a wrap-up class is something we're interested in at the very end, we can also look at putting that on the schedule so we can talk about what it was like to chant this text together, and any questions that we have can come up at that point. For practicality's sake, when we're on Zoom, we're gonna have to mute everyone during the actual chanting, so it's just not echo, 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 echo. So don't be self-conscious. No one's gonna hear you chanting. You all hear me, and you can make fun of my pronunciation of everything. That's fine. And then after the chant is over, we'll turn the sound back on so that everyone can say anything that they need to say. We can start our day together in that way. I think it's going to be really beautiful. All right, we have like 2 minutes left. Does anyone have anything else? This was so beautiful. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
end. Thank you, Noah.